Angela, you just came down from Cork. We were talking prior to this on the phone. You've had a lot of problems with the state in Ireland here. It's a horrific story, the points you've told me so far, and you want to get this on tape to let people know your story and to see if there's other people out there like you.
I'm sure this can't just be happening to us.
I'm sure it's not.
Yeah.
Now, I know at the minute you're homeless.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to take it from there and maybe work back as to what caused this problem.
Well, the electricity got cut off, I'd say, the end of January, the 21st, something like that, Wednesday, I believe. And we just went home without warning. The electricity didn't work. And initially we thought, well, maybe it's just a temporary thing because it was windy or something. So we checked with the neighbours' houses and their lights were on, and we just had no electricity. Then we checked the water and the water was off because the water is run by the electricity. We don't have mains, we have the well in the garden. So that caused a big issue because we didn't know it was going to happen that particular day. The last time I got a disconnection notice was in September.
So did they disconnect the electricity knowing that you relied on that for your water supply?
They did know that because I'd been in contact with Bord Gosh, the electricity company, quite a number of times, and I'd been in contact with the chief executive, and I put it in there that if you disconnect me with the water, it disconnects the electric.
So
she knew full well.
They didn't care that you had no water in the house, a basic human right, and they deliberately turned it off.
Yeah. And that night we stayed there was very, very difficult. We couldn't cook properly because of the lack of water. We couldn't actually use the toilet and the basic facilities. So we had to find somewhere else to be after that night, and we've just been staying with friends. Unfortunately, there's some good people in Ireland to actually help us out.
It's an awful dilemma to be in.
If it was just me, maybe I'd have just coped with it. But I've got kids that are actually needing to do their homework and not by torchlight, or to be able to use the toilet freely like normal.
I mean, in a modern day society that shouldn't happen. But there was a lead up to this, obviously. Your story didn't.
Yeah. I've had quite a few disconnection notices over the years because we live on welfare, and for some reason the welfare keeps getting stopped and started and stopped and started for no reason that is valid. And on this last occasion I got a disconnection notice in around July time. So because the bill was getting big and whatever I was paying towards it wasn't touching the sides of it, I contacted an organisation called MABS. I'm not quite sure what MABS stands for, but
they're a debt mediation organisation.
We were led to believe that they would help us. The lady I spoke to said that she took the details, and I read all the details from the letter that I'd got for disconnection, and she said that she'd put a stay on it. She'd phone the company up and put a stay on it. I thought that was good, and she said she'd come back to me. So she said there was a 10-day stay. So I didn't think any more about it. For the next couple of days I was thinking about something else, and there was enough to keep me occupied. And then I hadn't heard from her for about a week, so I tried to phone them again. Or the number I was getting from the national MABS number was that the person I needed to speak to wasn't there, they'd take a message. So I thought that was good enough, somebody would still get back to me, and nobody got back to me. So I tried the local number, and yet again that was just ringing and ringing and ringing, nobody was answering. And this carried on for a few weeks, and I tried quite a few times.
So what you're saying is that you couldn't get through to MABS, and that the ESB made no alternative arrangement to facilitate you, that they could have put in a meter or a coin box, just so you would have had electricity.
I didn't hear any more. Than the local number was just ringing and ringing, wouldn't answer. And the national number, when I was trying, every time I went through to that number, the person that answered said the person I needed to speak to wasn't there, and they would leave a message. That's how it was left. So this carried on for quite some time, and obviously I was getting a bit upset because I needed to know what was happening. Come about September, I got another disconnection notice, and I couldn't understand because MABS had said they were helping me and sorting it out, and I hadn't heard any more from them. So that same day I phoned MABS, the national number, up, and I spoke to somebody who I think her name was Anya, and I was speaking to her, and she went away looking at a computer, and she was saying that what had happened is they'd actually put a stay on it when I'd phoned them in the July time, and there wasn't any. They'd gone to Bord Gosh to try and organise something, and they'd organised something for me to pay like 200 and something a week, something like that. A week, which was a ridiculously silly figure that I wouldn't be able to pay. And not only had they done that, they hadn't told me about it. So with not telling me about it, this was the reason for the second disconnection notice now, to get me disconnected because I wasn't able to pay what they'd agreed.
And did you see TD about this, your local TD, or, you know, to say how you were being badly treated?
Well, not at the time, because when I've gone to see the TDs before, there's been some issues with going to see them and asking for help. They're not the most helpful people. No. On one occasion, because the bottom line of this is where they've been giving me my welfare entitlement and then cutting it off, and then there's a big long gap, and then they give me the welfare that I'm entitled to and then cut it off again. This has caused a situation where I can't budget for the future because they keep cutting it off and starting it and cutting it off for the most bizarre reasons. Back along, we had the welfare forms put in, and I think I applied for 16 welfare things. There was fuel allowance, and there was
crazy reasons as to why they were stopping the welfare.
There was found to be no reason. In the very beginning, I applied for the welfare forms. I think I applied for about 16 or 18. Some quite a lot of form filling at that particular time in the beginning. And this was in 2010. And every single form I was putting in, this lady that was writing back to me, I think she was an acting superintendent called Mayo. She would write back to me and refuse whatever I asked for. And if I was asking for whatever, she'd write back and say no. And she'd always give a bizarre reason. She was putting it in writing to me that I wouldn't have any welfare, but the Department of Social Protection the Department of Justice would pay for my plane fare home. She didn't clarify where she felt home was, because home was where I put on the address on the application form.
They'd pay for your plane fare home?
Yeah, the Department of Justice would.
And what way did you feel when that was said? What way did you take it?
Well, for every for every letter that I got back that was actually refusing me something, I was putting in an appeal letter.
Yeah.
So if I put in an emergency payment for something because it was getting quite tight, I've got kids to feed, and with having the lack of money, this went on. So St Vincent de Paul were a charity, and they were actually paying the money for us to feed. And it was €50 they were giving us in vouchers, and that has to last us very often 3 weeks to feed all my family, and that was incredibly hard.
That must have made you feel so small. So, you know, all you wanted was your basic entitlements.
No. But fortunately we found ways around that. We would go blackberry picking, and we would eat more than we would ever need to eat. Picking the blackberries off the hedgerows and eating the things from the hedgerows. That did bump us up. And it carried on back along, and I was putting in the appeals. I'd go to the oral hearings and sit and do my best at the oral hearings, and then be told in the letter, no, you can't have anything. So I went for a second appeal, and that was told, they put it in writing and told me no, I couldn't have anything. And they were using the habitual residence condition at the time. But there was a common travel area that I was able to use, so they shouldn't have been using the habitual residence condition.
No.
And this carried on for some 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Eventually, once I'd gone for the 2 appeals and they told me no, I actually put the letters in and actually asked the appeals department to put me in a review. I wanted a review of the whole thing. In between time, I'd gone and seen a solicitor in the Legal Aid Board, Betty Deneen. She was the managing solicitor there.
Right.
And I'd gone to see her, and she said, yeah, we can help you. I asked her for 2 things, one of which was this welfare problem that was getting quite critical at that stage, where we would go out foraging. We would go out foraging, and all the kids in the area would want to know what we're doing. And then they were following as well, thinking it was a great crack, and everybody had the buckets and we were going. And the kids were actually eating what we were picking, whereas the other kids were doing it just for something novel to do. But we were doing it because we needed to feed the family.
I mean, this day and age to be put in that position would be awful. I can't imagine how you felt, and it's very degrading as well.
And taking charity money.
I can imagine.
At one point, I put in an emergency payment form. I put in about 16 emergency payment forms for food, and each one was turned down. On one occasion, I went into the community welfare officer, and it was a day when I was feeling quite upset with the situation, because it's hard to feed a family just like this. €50 for up to 3 weeks is quite difficult.
Sorry, can we just clarify how many children you had?
3.
3.
Yeah, and each of them feed, you know, quite an adult-sized portion.
Of course, yeah.
So in effect, it was they would be eating what was available, and I would be having whatever was left, and I'm quite happy with that. But it would be nice if we could all eat properly.
A basic human right, you would have thought.
You would have thought so.
Did you find that when you were dealing with the authorities in Ireland, did you find them would you put it down to prejudice or racialism? You know, that you were.
Well, I was quite
England,
upset
or?
with the first letter that came back and said that they wouldn't give me any welfare at all, and this included child benefits as well.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give me anything, but the Department of Justice would pay for my plane fare home. I didn't think that was right.
And you have that actually in writing, how
I
do? Yeah,
I
think that's disgraceful.
I do, because she didn't clarify where she thought home was.
Yeah.
And I didn't need any plane fare assistance to get from one part of the country to another. I didn't feel. So on one occasion I went into the community welfare officer, and obviously it was getting quite a difficult situation to be dealing with, and I saw this community welfare officer called Tom Denny, and sat across the desk from him, and I mentioned that this was getting quite difficult, and he was telling me, I've been told to pay you nothing. And I said to him, who's told you that I can't have anything to live on and feed my family? And he said, I'm not obliged to tell you that. So I couldn't get to the bottom of who was the person telling him. And I had known other people that had gone to the community welfare officer and come out with money. And yet I was asking for food and he wasn't giving me anything. All I got told was somebody above was telling him not to pay me, but he wouldn't identify who this person at the top was.
So the message you got was basically, it's okay to come to Ireland, but don't look for anything.
That seemed to be the case.
Yeah.
Into so much as he had a Kit Kat chocolate bar and a cup of tea on his desk at the time, and he shoved the Kit Kat chocolate bar just across the table and said to me, see if that helps. And it's the way he said that made it quite clear that we were some kind of scum that had come to the country.
He showed serious contempt.
He didn't show any emotion on his face when he did that. It was just everyday occurrence. Just see if that helps. And so I came out of there quite upset, and I made a complaint about it. The complaint didn't go anywhere, even though I sent it to Enda Kelly by email and by post. I'm still waiting for a response from that.
That tends to be the scenario in Ireland, that there doesn't seem to be anyone held accountable. There's no oversight bodies, and you know.
Well, it was getting me into a fix because at that point the electricity bill was mounting up, and what happened was, in 2012, in the February, I got a letter from the appeals department to tell me that on review, now this wasn't on appeal, this was on review, I've been entitled to the money I've been asking for, my entitlement. I've been entitled from that day. The date of the letter was February 2012. This was some 2 years over when I'd applied to it. And I was entitled to it from day one when I'd applied for it. And that really upset me because it wasn't just saying I was entitled to it at that day, and he'd made the decision then. So I got to thinking, well, why on appeal couldn't I actually, you know, have that decision made, and then we wouldn't have had all this hardship. So they started to pay me the money of what I was entitled to, just the child benefit. They didn't pay me any welfare still. They found a reason around that. They paid me the child benefit, and we had to live on the child benefit then, which was a lot better than the €50 from St Vincent de Paul for 3 weeks. And 2 weeks to the date after that, didn't she go and cut it off again? The welfare office, the acting superintendent, Maria O'Flynn, cut it off a second time, and she cut the child benefit. She cut the supplementary welfare off. And so we didn't have it, and that was without notifying me that it was going to be cut that day.
No reason again.
So no reason whatsoever. And then she was writing letters to say I needed to fill in another form, and I was writing back to her to say that I'd filled in all the forms, I'd done more than enough forms, and there was an appeal already outstanding with the appeals department. But she wouldn't have it. It didn't get anywhere, and we just had to live on child benefits.
It seems crazy.
Which is very hard.
Yeah, it seems crazy that in one instance you're entitled to it, then they take it away, then they give it back and take it away. It's
well,
very,
in effect, what happened is the backdated money that they paid me from being owed that money all back along had to then be used for the future because they didn't pay me any welfare. Even though the letter said that I was habitually resident from the date that I'd applied. So the money they paid me just got soaked up into the future instead of it being backdated and any benefits whatsoever. So very short term it was gone.
Basically they abused the situation, you know, they misled the facts.
The welfare situation. Meantime, I'd gone to see a solicitor and this Betty Dineen, and she said, yes, we can help you. She got me to give her the information, which I was happy to do, and she sent off to have a barrister to help us. And Dennis Cronin, I think his name is, and he was to do a judgment on the situation. And I waited for this judgment to come through, and in the end it was a 12-page judgment that was no relevance to anything that was related to me. He did a judgment on an opinion on the habitual residency condition, not how they'd abused it and the decisions they'd made in my situation. So this thing he wrote about the opinion of the habitual residency condition was marvellous, but it was only about the habitual residency condition and whether that was valid or not.
So he was actually getting paid by the state as well, was he?
He was paid a lot of units, and to actually do that judgment, which must have taken him a while and 12 pages. So I sat down and actually organised, it took some time, to actually write a response to that. And mine did take 12 pages as well, funny enough, because he got my name wrong. He couldn't even get my name right. He got the situation wrong. He cobbled up quite a bit of the information to do this, and that could have only, and I didn't know whether the solicitor had given them the wrong instructions or whether he hadn't read the instructions properly. And I'm still not sure what happened.
So basically,
I sent the details back to the solicitor to ask her to send it to the barrister for him to make a relevant judgment about the situation, because he was making a judgment on whether there was a option to go for a judicial review, which would have sorted this out. And because of his opinion being so unrelated to the situation, it was only about the habitual residency condition, not the decisions that they'd abused about using the habitual residency condition. Then it didn't get very far at all. So about that, because I actually didn't know about the habitual residence in the beginning. I had no clue what that was. And I telephoned somebody in the government department in welfare and asked them if there was an habitual residence department, and there was. So when I spoke to the people in the office there, I got them to send me through the information about the habitual residency condition, just to give me an insight in what this was about. And when I read it, it was quite a lengthy document, and as I was reading it, we were habitually resident and there was no grounds to actually use that, and I couldn't understand what they were using that for. And there's also, I found, a common travel area. So that overrides the habitual residency condition insofar as the common travel area. If you're living in the country within the common travel area, it's as if you're living in Ireland.
Could you define for me what an actual habitual resident is?
Well, I can't remember the ins and outs of what the document said at the time, but roughly it was like 2 years before you get anything in the habitual residency condition. But there were certain grounds where that...
Angela, I'm just going to do a recap, just so everyone is clear of the position. So from 2010 to 2012, you received absolutely nothing from the state here, except you survived on Vincent de Paul.
Yeah, and the hedgerows.
And you, yourself and 3 kids. That was all you had.
Yeah.
And from, let's say, 2012 to the present date, they've been giving you welfare, stopping it, messing you around in general, you know. And
from 2012 in the February, they paid me supplementary welfare, which was the interim benefit payment, and they paid me child benefits for the first time.
Right.
And 2 weeks probably to the date of that, didn't she go and Mayo cut off the supplementary welfare for giving me no reason, giving me no awareness of when she would do it.
So basically, you've been,
so we lived on child benefits.
You've been treated like the lowest of the low. That you weren't entitled to life, you weren't entitled to water. They don't care, no electric, no money. You've been totally messed around by the state and prejudiced by them.
Well, I seem to have gone this full circle of the people that I would have believed that would help me, like the TDs. I put in one emergency payment form for food.
Which TDs did you see?
I saw Anya Collins. She's a TD.
Anya Collins,
There was a situation that in the course of events, I got a letter of social workers to say that they wanted to see me in their office, and so I went to see them in their office, and it was because I wasn't living on any money. So this was causing a huge heap of bother that I didn't live on any money from what I felt I was entitled to. And so Anya Collins, the TD, came with me. She drove me to the office, to the social workers, and we sat in the office and they were told that we were living on the hedgerows. I was honest with them. We didn't have any money, but I was doing my damnedest to be able to work around the situation as best as I could. Anya Collins was there at the time when she heard the social workers say that they'd closed the file, knowing that we'd live on nothing. She closed the file and they wouldn't be able to do anything to help me because it wasn't a child protection concern. And Anya Collins put in the she put in a claim for expenses for taking me. Yeah, she confirmed that last month. And so she would have got the expenses for taking me. And then she didn't do anything either, so she left me with nothing to live on whatsoever.
And how high in government did you go? Did you go above her head?
I went to quite a few other TDs. I went to Sean Sherlock, he's a TD. The best he could do is his staff threatened with the guards if I didn't get out of their office. I went to Michael Moynihan.
Michael Moynihan?
Yeah, he's a TD. And I went to him quite a few times, and on one occasion he got his staff, I sat with him and told him how difficult it was. He sat with his legs crossed and his arms crossed, just looking at the ceiling, which I thought was quite rude because I got kids to feed.
You were interfering with his day, that's the way you felt.
He just wasn't bothered. So I didn't raise my voice because I was just taken aback by how rude he was. I just said, well, am I boring you? And he just didn't answer. So I came out of his office and was in the hallway. I thought, well, if he's not listening, I'll just put something in writing and pass it to his staff to give it to him. I was sat writing it in the hallway, and the guards were at the door in the next second. And they arrested me for something.
So the girls came into it, okay. So you've learned that you've tried the legal route to get answers, which has failed you.
There was one TD that was helpful, Angus O'Snoddig. He was a TD, and he was writing a letter, which I still have, to them to say I was a Victory resident, and it turned out I was. And he did write a parliamentary question, because at one point I put an emergency payment for food again, one of about 16 maybe, and I was just told I needed to get some photographs of the inside and an outside of a house that we hadn't even lived in. And I went to Angus O'Snoddig to see whether that was right, and I put it in writing to him. And he wrote a parliamentary question to ask me what was the relevance of that. This was an application form for food. What relevance would photographs be? And it was just justified. And I didn't get anything for food, no.
The problem with parliamentary questions is it's a thing that doesn't work, and a lot of people know it, and it's just paying lip service to people with problems.
Just gets justified.
It just blows in the wind.
Along that time it was getting very cold as well, and one of the applications I put in was for fuel allowance, and when it got to -17, which is quite cold, when you've got no heating and you're in a fix for trying to find money for food and everything at that time, and St Vincent de Paul had just given you €50 to last Bayofton for 3 weeks. the best we could do was actually just huddle together as a family to keep warm. And around that Christmas time, I had the text number from Tom Delaney, the community welfare officer, and I texted him. I mean, what kind of welfare officer are you leaving us in this situation? This is Christmas Eve now. And I didn't hear anything at all. And the following year, when we were still in the same situation in the 2011, I texted him the same message that I found, and all I put in, how come you're just leaving in this situation again? Again. This was for the second year, Christmas Eve with nothing. That's quite difficult when you've got Christmas and you can give nothing to your kids. And a charity has to give them the presents that you want to give them.
It's an absolutely heartbreaking story, but I know we discussed this. Would you like to tell us about when your 3 children were actually taken into custody?
They were kidnapped, I'll call them what it is.
Yeah.
I was, I had a car and I needed a car to be able to get around.
Yeah.
We need the car to take them to school, I need the car to get the shopping, and I need the car. Yeah. And I did my best to get the documents for the car that I know you need, like the car tax and the this and the insurance. St Vincent de Paul were paying for the insurance, but I didn't have the money at the time for the car tax, and it was only out a few months. And I was travelling along, I'd taken them to school, and I was popped into the garage to just pick up, I think it was just a minor item, but thanks God it was. When I went into the garage forecourt, there was a car just coming behind me, and I didn't pay much credence to it. I was just minding my own business. I was about to get out of the car at the time, and the guard that I now know to be Dennis Curtin came to the window from behind the car, and he stood at my window, and he had some issue with car tax. And there was two of the guards. There was one, Gary Kingston, and he was stood with this other one.
These girls are based in Cork.
Yeah.
Okay, so he followed you into a private garage.
This was in a private car they followed me in. It wasn't a marked guard's car.
It was a private car.
A private
wasn't even
car.
an unmarked car, no.
It wasn't even a marked car, no.
Okay.
And they didn't have their shoulder numbers on. And they didn't have anything to show me that they were guards.
Okay, so you think there was a sinister background to
They followed me onto the back garage forecourt. And one would be somewhere in the shop doorway for the garage making a phone call, while the other one would be stopping me getting out of my car, whilst out of his mouth was saying get out of the car, which didn't make sense. He was blocking my getting out of the car by his body in the way of the car. And at one point when I did get out of the car, he told me to go back in the car. So it was an hour and a half of this.
He was being vexatious. He was trying to provoke you.
Well, it just didn't make sense. Either, this was an hour and a half of messing about, and both cops would actually be together, and then they'd be talking Irish, so I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. And then the other one would go and make a phone call, and then they'd come and talk Irish again amongst themselves, and then the other one would go. So there was always one at the car. And I didn't have too much of a worry, because in front of me was a CCTV camera. And I thought, after this event, I'll have a copy of that as well. And I do have it, to show that for an hour and a half on the garage forecourt, messing about. And then the car came behind me, the marked car came, and 2 women guards got out. And they arrested me, but I'd say they kidnapped me, and put the handcuffs on me for some reason, and searched me on the garage forecourt, which by this time, an hour and a half later, there's a window full of customers enjoying the carry-on now.
What reason did they give you for the arrest?
It wasn't too clear, but he wanted me to give up my car. And I said, well, I need this car. And he said, well, it hasn't got car tax, so I'm taking it. I said, well, you have to take me in it then, because I need the car.
Absolutely.
So when that bit came to court, there was 2 charges, and they both disappeared. But because in the total events I was taken for 10.5 hours, I had 10.5 hours of this, and then I was left at some court, a good 90 miles away from my home, and just told by that guard, make your own way home. And he knew I had no money in my pocket or anything. And in between that time of the 10.5 hours, the same cops had arranged at dinner time to actually go into the school and actually take my kids from school during school hours, and the two principals had just freely handed over my kids for no justification whatsoever.
So you were starting at this stage to see an intertwining of the state bodies. You'd seen
the lack of money
Yeah.
was bringing the cops on me, and for no justified reason other than I just couldn't pay, and it was just about car tax.
Okay, so what happened to your kids then?
Well, I didn't want to go to court, but obviously I wanted my kids home. So I went to court and I attended the court cases, and I heard the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard in my life by somebody in the court that I would have been believing beforehand that they would have had some respect for the law, and but what I saw in that family court is a farce. The only child protection reasons that they could use, that my kids couldn't use a hairdryer.
That's a major.
I never heard so much. I never heard so much of that.
And that was an excuse they used.
That was the best they could come up with.
Yeah, that was the reason that they kept your kids in.
I think that's what it amounted to. They tried to make up some other reasons, but it didn't wash. And the cops had, the guards had actually smashed into my home the following day after this.
Yeah.
They'd broken the front window and actually gone into my home with no warrant. It was found at court. There was no warrant whatsoever because they were called as a witness in the court in this excuse for a family law case by Brian Sheridan, just rubber stamping all sorts of court orders.
Brian Sheridan would have been.
He was supposed to be the judge.
The judge, yeah. Crazy
and
situation.
I appealed it, and I took it to the next court up, and they were trying to get me a solicitor. They were trying to get me a legal aid solicitor. But what I'd seen of this legal aid with the welfare situation, I wasn't really happy with that.
The problem is there, you've got a solicitor that's getting paid by the state, and he's compromised. He's obliged to the state because
if they could mess up me not getting any money,
Yeah.
I didn't trust them bringing my kids
Definitely
home.
not with kids, no.
So I went, I don't know what made me do it one particular day. I think it was hearing about this hairdryer he wanted to rubber stamp the court orders for.
Yeah.
So I came out of there and I don't know what made me do it. I went into the office and just asked to appeal it. I've got to appeal this because they were starting to talk about a lot longer that they were not going to be home with me. And there wasn't any child protection reason. Even Brian Sheridan, not just once, he was saying I can't see any child protection issue, but he was just rubber stamping the court orders. So I went to the circuit court and I was up in front of Judge Moran at the circuit court.
Judge Karen Moran, is it?
I didn't know his first name.
Yeah.
But the two court cases, and then the HSC barrister was wanting a whole heap of things, and he didn't get any of them, and my kids came home that day because even the judge there said nobody had shown him any child protection issues at all, and the judge dismissed all 12 court orders that Brian Sheridan had made.
But how long were they in care?
I would have got them home the following month.
Yeah.
I was having to walk to the court. Brian Sheridan had made the court case at Fermoy, which is a fair distance away from where it would normally be in Mayo. And because the cops had taken my car, and because there's no public transport to this Fermoy place, this Fermoy court, and because there's no anything, I didn't have the money to be able to get there. I was walking the 15 miles to go to court because I knew my kids would be going to come home. There was no reason in the court cases that I'd had where they should even be in care. And I was walking along. 15 miles wasn't a bother to me. I had my court papers, and I was walking. No bother at all.
You wanted to see your kids.
I would have walked 100 miles.
You would have done the Alps if you had to get them back.
Broken glass, a lot of it. There wasn't anything going to stop me that night.
No,
the cops did. The cops came in the van and wanted to know where I was going. I told them I was going to Fermoy. They wanted to take me to Fermoy. I said, no, I'm happy walking. It was a beautiful night. It wasn't a bother me walking at all. And they put me in the van, carted me off. That was 12 and a half hours gone. That made me miss my court case the next morning, because the next morning I phoned up the court and I spoke to Val, I think her name is. I spoke to the court registrar in the court, and I said, you're going to have to ask Brian Sheridan to adjourn the case. I can't attend, I've been kidnapped again. And she says, what do you mean I've been kidnapped? And I said, well, that's exactly what it is, to stop me going to the court. And her words were, you have to attend today because you're very likely to get your kids home. I said, I know that, that's why it's happened. 12 and a half hours.
So that was just pure malice on behalf of the states, and you could see that the guards were actually working with the state. There was actually a grudge. You were starting to see an actual conspiracy
I knew
against you.
that it was Brian Sheridan had even said there was no child protection reason, and I was going to get my kids home the following month.
Just a question, and I've done a bit of investigation into this myself. When your kids were taken into custody, do you think that there was a financial gain for someone by them being taken into custody?
I know there was.
You know there was.
I know there was.
Yeah.
I looked into it at the time and I did some homework on it.
Yeah.
€350 a week for each child.
In care to the carer, yeah.
And at the time, there was something like 4,500 kids in care, just in Ireland.
Yeah.
Now there's not 4,500 kids in care and one of the parents is in prison.
Right, yeah.
So the numbers don't tally for some kind of abuse or neglect or something.
And do you think that...
And it's more if they can get them on medication.
Is that right, yeah?
Yeah.
And do you think
and
that...
it's more if they're over 12.
Do you think that the situation is abuse when the kids are in care, that maybe they're going to someone involved with the taking of these kids into care?
Well, from what I know now and the discussions I've had about this same situation with the people involved, the so-called child minders was the cop's sister for the one in the garage forecourt.
That was very convenient, wasn't it?
Gary Kingston and Dennis Curtin were the ones in the forecourt harassing me during that an hour and a half for some context of no car tax on the windscreen.
And after that then a member of their family financially gains from
Dennis
that.
Curtin, he has a sister and it's her sister that was looking after and making a whole heap of money supposedly looking after my kids.
So that just goes to show you that there's a sinister element to the Gardaí again here, and I just wonder how many cases is out there. I know I've been told of quite a few of exactly like yours, where people connected to the taking into care of children are actually making money out of it, or there's some kind of some kind of a ring there. And we've also heard of other cases where kids which are taken into state care
because they have blonde hair,
end up being abused. Yeah.
Once they're taken into care for having blonde hair. I was aware of a Polish woman whose little boy he was 4. He was wanted to be taken. The state wanted to take him because he supposedly didn't have enough vitamin D. They did take him. They made money out of him as well.
What a crazy little country we live in. So, well, all I can say is it's an absolutely shocking story, and my heart goes out to you and your kids. It should not happen to anyone. I don't think animals be treated like that, and I'm just disgusted with the state that we live in, and I'm ashamed of them. And I hope anyone watching this video can in some way tune in and give us all the support, and Angela all the support she needs. She's homeless. She has no water on in the house.
Well, we've been forced out of our home.
We've been forced out of your home.
We want to live there, and the kids want to go to school. But now we've been forced out of our home because of the lack of facilities now.
For a state to conspire against anyone and use all the organs of the state to destroy someone and a family, and I've met the girls, 3 lovely girls. It's a crazy situation, and anyone watching this video that's in a similar situation to Angela, she needs all the support you can get. We'll do what we can for her, and please get in touch with us, and we have to stop this happening in Ireland.
Thank you.